Sure. Sure. Hello, good morning. Sure. I'll start with who I am. Um, so again, I'm Mike Donegan, a longtime resident of East Greenwich. I lived here, I've moved here in, 92, raised 5 children here. My wife, Linda Donegan, has an office on South County Trail. The 5 of our children went through the East Greenwich public school systems. I have 3 in college right now, 1 in law school, and our freshman who just graduated from last year, unfortunately, is enjoying his freshman fall in his childhood bedroom with his parents. So I was involved in the school system with my children in many ways. I was the mock trial coach at Cole Middle School for 7 years. I then worked with Model UN at the high school, and I was the advisor for the last several years. We go to conferences with a lot of children at the various colleges and universities, and we take over 50 once a year for most of a week to the actual United Nations in New York City, and that's probably the biggest club on campus at the high school. We run a budget that's the biggest budget of any club or activity in the high school, and the kids get to do things like last year. We went and were in with the delegations from Cuba. We're with the delegation from Libya, and the kids get to ask questions and talk about what's happening in Libya. And so those are great experiences. Really enjoyed that. I also was the debate team coach in the high school for a few years, and that involved almost every Saturday during the year coaching, and more importantly, being a judge at the debates, because apparently you have to qualify to be a varsity judge, which means you've done it before, and there aren't a lot of people who do it. So I've enjoyed all of that, and that's me and my family. I have served in East Greenwich in various capacities for most of my time here. When I first moved to East Greenwich, I was on the Conservation Commission for 2 terms. That doesn't exist anymore, but that was an advisory group on development and conservation issues in the town. I later was appointed to the planning board, where I served for 3 terms there, and I was the chairman of the planning board, which was responsible for development of the capital budgets. I was involved in the drafting of the comprehensive community plan, which is sort of the shared values and blueprint for our community and its development moving forward. So that was, sort of an important activity I was involved in. And then most of my tenure as chairman was really when the real estate development exploded in Rhode Island, and affordable housing and all of that. So we were busy for years on every significant development project in the town. What then happened was we were a community that had become quite fractured. We were reading about East Greenwich in the newspapers daily, seeing embarrassing stories on the news. There was a bankruptcy narrative that was being put out, and essentially I wanted to change all of that. East Greenwich had lost its brand as one of the best communities in the state. We had effectively defunded the schools. They couldn't meet their needs. The school committee had gone out and done an audit in preparation for a Carullo action lawsuit against the town council to gain money to provide the necessary education for the children. And it was just the tenor of our community had changed dramatically. There was a lot of acrimony. Really, what was happening was due to the polarized climate we were in. We were seeing what we see in the national stage playing out in East Greenwich, and I wanted to change that. I had a lot of experience with the town. I understood budgets and finances. I understood the school needs. I had 5 children in the schools, and I thought with my turn the page on that, restore a council that the residents had confidence in, restore our brand, calm everybody down, fund our schools, and have responsible budgets. The last council had actually crafted a deficit budget where if it all went smoothly, you lost $1 million out of your capital reserves. I don't think that's a prudent way to run a local government. And so, I ran to try to bring more fiscal responsibility, fund our schools, and really calm the community down, provide the kind of leadership that they have confidence in so that they can go about their lives. In a well-run community, every single resident doesn't have to even know who's on the council. We want to be good umpires and referees that you don't even know our names until there's a problem. And so I was hoping to restore that kind of community. We did, yes. Yep, Chief Patton, we hired him. Yes. After. Mhm. Right. Yeah, about sure. So maybe I'll go back to, you were saying that the biggest kind of newsworthy event might have been the noise ordinance. To my thinking, while that was very important to try to strike a balance between the needs of the residents who live there and the businesses, which we did involve. We had a group that Andy led. We met with all the restaurants. We all hired experts. They even paid for it. And in the end, we've reached a compromise that's acceptable to all of the restaurants and us and the residents that meets the World Health Organization guidelines on decibel levels and all of that. So we did all of that, and there's one business on the waterfront that simply doesn't see it that way. They just want to be able to do what they want to do in the way that they've done it. And I think I said all but one. Yes. Yep. And so that's one that's litigated, and that'll play out. But we're confident And the process, my way of thinking, that may have gotten a little press, but that's not the biggest, issue that we had to deal with. When we came in, the town had not completed its audit. If you recall, under the last council, they didn't want to release the numbers prior to the election. And what they were making a lot of claims about bankruptcy and all of that, and so we didn't have any numbers. When we took over, the finance director who they hired, who was both the finance director for the schools in the town, quit. We then replaced the town manager. We didn't have a fire chief. That's how the last town council handled that. So what we had to do was get control of our finances. We had to figure out what we had and what our liabilities were, what our cash position was. We had to look at our reserves. We had over some of them with very significant exposures. We had to complete an audit, but before we could do any of that, we had to rebuild the government. We had to build a finance department that was credible, that had experience, that it wasn't a political hire. They were actually hired, Trish, who was a talented finance director, and gave her support. We hired Andy, who was an experienced town manager. We didn't hire somebody who was going to learn on the job, who was just a smart person who had some limited experience. I mean, Andy not headed other departments. He's got a law degree, a degree in finance. He has negotiated union contracts. He has represented communities in front of the State House. He has an executive position with the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, is on the board of the Interlocal Trust. He has a footprint in Rhode Island and at the General Assembly, really like no other town manager. And his experience and talents are in evidence. Look at how he's helping manage us through this COVID crisis. And so we committed to that. We committed to hire excellence and rebuild our government so that it can run effectively and efficiently without council members who run every 2 years. We have to have an institution that survives on its merits and a manager who can run it. So my view is the biggest, challenge we had to face was to rebuild our government, hire a town manager and a finance director. We then were confronted. All of that goes to, we don't know what our budget is. We don't know how much money we have. And we have 5 union contracts. We had to negotiate those. We did that, and the unions worked with us, and we got a 0% increase the first year, and then a 2% and a 2%. We got a lot of other benefits in the fire contract, got floaters back, which were hundreds of thousands of dollars in benefit that were given away in the prior administration. We modified the agreement so that we saved through our union contracts over $6 million in unfunded other post-employment benefits. So unfunded liabilities for pensions, we crafted that to save, almost $6 million. We then had an issue where we can only take advantage of the new contracts with the fire department if we could hire laterally, but there was a challenge under the old contract that we inherited pension liabilities. And so we restructured it completely. So when you come here, you can't come in for a day, retire, and get your full pension from us. You get 2% a year for every year you work. And that allows us to have a fighting chance to fill the positions. Now, in the first year, the word on how East Greenwich treats its employees in the past administration was out there. Hiring people is a challenge, and it remains a challenge, but we're working to fill those positions. So we've had some leave, but we, where that landed is when the current employees cycle out, East Greenwich will only be paying about 40% of retirement benefits that we otherwise would have paid without the changes. So all of that was important for us. The school committee had reached out and said that the audit that they performed in preparation for a lawsuit against the prior council, they basically said, we either provide funding or we're going to be in that same lawsuit because they needed the money. They asked for a supplemental appropriation. we met and had to decide how to do that, and we gave them a supplemental appropriation to get through to the next budget cycle. So, all of these, while the noise ordinance, I think, is very important for the residents down there, and we worked hard at it, I think all of these other things impact the broader community in a much bigger way. And they operated to restore our brand as a community whose primary attraction is our schools. So we funded them. When you have great schools like we have, your property values are higher. And so it supports so much on us. And when we properly manage our budgets and don't deficit spend, we don't have to try to lobby each year with the bond rating companies for a rating that was threatened by that deficit spend in order to keep our rating the same and our interest rates that we pay the same. So all of those things are kind of deep dive, and they weren't always maybe obvious to everyone. But this time, every week for months, we were doing it. It was a part-time job and sometimes a full-time job to drill down into all of these legal and financial issues, regulations from the state. And every one of the council members put the time in, prioritized it, worked with the town manager, our tax assessor, the finance directors, all of this to fully and completely understand how big issues that I saw as really impacting our residents during the first year. We also, as you know, tried to make everything restore kind of the integrity and trust. So we put all the town council meetings online. So everyone can now watch what we're doing exactly and participate as they want online. This obviously, when the COVID crisis hit, we were already prepared to kind of deal with this. Then I think that you said the COVID crisis was the next thing we had to deal with, but it kind of wasn't. It was the ransomware attack. So we had, while COVID was perking there and we weren't sure what was happening, we and many other communities and the hospitals, we received a ransomware attack, and it'll lock up your system if you don't pay untold sums of money. Fortunately, we had prepared for that, and Andy Nada has a lot of experience, as does the Interlocal Trust. We got good advice, and we had a parallel backup system. So we only went down for a little bit. We didn't interrupt our services. We paid no ransom, and we went right back online. Now, there were costs to bring in the experts to go through every computer, right? So you don't have some nascent, we made insurance claims on that. But certainly that was another unexpected challenge that we had to deal with. And then the COVID crisis hits. Yes, we did. Yep. Yes. And so so COVID hit, and everything stopped, right? We had to deal first with, how do we run the government? How do we tell our employees they're safe? What can we do online? What can we move off site? What must happen in town hall? And so, Andy Nada is great when it comes to organization, preparation. He worked and set it up so that we kept the town hall open. The essential services that you need to run the government remained uninterrupted. I mean, even things like, if you wanted to buy or sell a house, how do you record a deed, right? How do you, if you need a permit, how do you apply? How do we respond in a meaningful time frame? So Andy, I credit him with keeping our government open and running initially when everything was just shut down. What then happened is we had to bring it back slowly and in compliance with state mandates. So some of these issues that you see in the news described as choice are not. They're state mandates by executive order. Um, in order, what? So, for instance, social distancing in restaurants. How do you open? How does that all work? Um, so, Andy, then we also so we had to get that all have a plan and manage that, which took enormous amounts of time. Then what we did is the council wanted to figure out a way that we could help our businesses survive. And so the form that took initially was to explore how we could open Main Street, uh, in a way that allowed them to have enough patrons while still adhering to the social distancing requirements. That you have a license that gives you a capacity for a restaurant, but you can only have social distancing requirements mean you can only have half of that or a third of that. You simply can't get the customer base to make this work for you. So what we did was we created a process where the businesses could come in and say, can we use our parking lot as outdoor seating? Can we use public spaces? Can we do that? And what we did, yes. Mhm. Sure. So there are a couple of things that, again, all of this is kind of deep dive. You need to spend lots of hours every week, like we do, to get the details. But the short answer is that the state, requires us basically to appoint someone. There's no way. So we participate. Some of the council members, I know I do, and Andy participates in the daily download from the state. So we have the governor's staff downloads everything from finances, how we are preparing to seek reimbursement under the stimulus programs, um, to safety issues, economic issues, first responder issues. So all of that is happening daily, and Andy is the point person who participates in to address everything timely to protect our residents and help our businesses and all of that. The state asked us, we have to appoint someone as the point person with executive authority. And so that's why every community has picked someone. We have a town manager system here. And so Andy is our person given these emergency powers. In the same way the governor has them, every municipality has them. So that's what Andy's authority is. I'm sorry. No, we could no. We don't have to do it. It's not a legal requirement. It's simply the only way for us to participate in any effective way and make decisions that the facts and the disease and the economics and the mandates, all of those things change daily. There simply wouldn't be an opportunity if the outbreak expanded, contracted, or there was a need to do something for safety, or we could take advantage of a financial opportunity. There simply is no time for to have council meetings, the council deliberate and take action. And so that's why we delegate to Andy these emergency kind of powers, which is what every community is doing. Sure. So, kind of when I discussed why I feel like a lot of what I had hoped to accomplish, uh, the town council was, I won't to just go back to that. We had, contracts with our unions. We opened up the government and put town council meetings online. We resolved over 50 pieces of litigation on very favorable terms. We, you know, I feel like we streamlined all the business licensing process so it can all be online and it's no longer some ad hoc conversation every time that burdens the residents, who own businesses here and the business owners who don't live here. So I feel like we did a lot. We're not in the news every day. There are no ethical violations as we've seen. And I feel like we've turned the lights on, like the judge told East Greenwich to do. And we restored our brand, our community. The real estate market is hot here. People want to move in here. We're one of the few school districts in South County and in the state that is expanding because we're getting more students, more people want to live here. So I feel like we accomplished that. And by the way, despite the dire predictions of the last council, percent, we did not raise taxes 4%. In each of the years while running a balanced budget, we ran the tax budget 0.95% on the residents. And so, and it was the year before. So I feel like we've done all of this while managing the tax burden on our residents. Schools are excellent, property values are high, budgets are balanced, calm has been restored, and I feel very good about. The reason I'm running, it never ends. We still need to address our funding of our vital services in schools. And so as I look at it, I was involved in the drafting of the tax legislation that allowed us to keep on that. Justine Caldwell and Representative Caldwell and Senator Valverde, they worked with the council on that legislation. I testified at the State House. We got that done with the support of the Chamber of Commerce. And so that was to the table to help the town. Now we find that we're in a far more dire circumstance financially. The General Assembly, if you look at the forecast, is dramatically cutting funding to the municipal. So what is going to happen is they haven't done a budget yet. We were forced to pass our budget by statute, okay, without knowing what the state aid would be. Every community is in the same boat. So at some point in January, maybe, we're going to find out whether we're getting the funding upon which we rely, our schools and the town side. So we need to prepare for that. I feel like the work that I do professionally and my experience puts me in a position where I can really help the town. So for instance, one of the things I wanted to see happen and I put on the agenda was a proactive work at the General Assembly and or the Rhode Island Department of Education to address the conflict between the maintenance of effort requirements for the schools and our need to respond to the COVID crisis and the extraordinary school funding that's going to be necessary to keep our kids safe and in school. And essentially, the maintenance of effort requirement under the law says whatever the town council gave to the schools last year, they must give at least that much. That's in simple terms. So if right now, after we do the budget, schools incur hundreds of thousands or more in expenses to keep the schools open and the kids safe by state mandate, and they come to us seeking funds necessary to respond, we would be in a position where if we allocate those funds as a supplemental appropriation, and then the COVID crisis resolves, we're locked in forever as a council with funding that, even though the expenses associated with that funding have gone away. And efficiently and responsibly manage our budgets in the future and still help the schools and through this COVID crisis. We need relief from that legal obligation, which can only come one of two ways. One, at the General Assembly through statutory amendment, and I would work with our state representatives on drafting that and lobbying for that. The alternative is to go to the Rhode Island Department of Education, because under the statute, if they're one-time non-recurring expenses, with the approval of the commissioner, you can have that exemption so it doesn't apply to the maintenance of effort going forward. At the last council meeting, our council prioritized this. We invited Senator Valverde and Representative Caldwell to our meeting to talk about this specifically and get their help in arranging coordination with RIDE to go and have the commissioner, which is the fastest way to do this, agree with us that we could, if asked, fund these extraordinary COVID expenses for the schools and not be locked in to do that every year after the crisis abates. So I think those kinds of skills, the assessor and the town manager in looking at how we handle our tax rates and reduce the burden on the residents. Those are skills that I think I have that I can help the town with. And that's why I'm running again, to help us work as we need, keep the schools in excellent position, allows our kids to attend school, not all go remotely, while managing our taxes and budgets. I think I can help in that way. And that's why I'm running again. Mhm. Mhm. Sure. So, a lot of, so we inherited these, the police department and the fire department and all of our employees. And Andy's been on the job for, less than 2 years. And look, we live in interesting times for sure. Things are changing and we have to change with them. We mercifully are not confronted with a lot of the things we see in the news. Our policemen aren't some random policemen that we don't know. Many live in the community. We know them. This is not what you see played out in the national news, has not been happening in East Greenwich. And I'm grateful for that. While I believe that when it comes time for hiring and you post union jobs, right? If you want to hire police and you post that and try to get people interested in the academy, same with the fire department, we can only take the people who apply. And, I don't, as we move forward, I believe Andy is quite sensitive to these issues. You've probably seen him with Bob Hoteling on weekly videos talking about these very issues. And so for our community is responding to those social issues. The town council, as I see it, we find that a response like you're talking about is warranted, and being mindful of the fact that under our charter we govern by and through the town manager. Our town manager is working across our departments to try to address diversity and inclusion, which is a necessary path forward. And I know that his personal views are aligned with that, as are the council's. Mhm. Right. Right. So this all comes down to a matter of degree. If it turns out that the funding cuts are so dramatic that there isn't enough money, even with any tax increase, to keep full services, then we will have to start with what are essential services and expand out from there. And that's always a value judgment. We just simply don't know at this point. But what I can give you a very specific example of how this town council responded to potential cuts at the school department. So when the school committee presented their budget to us, and then we made our, we have these statutory meetings and this process where we interact with the school committee and we collaboratively try to develop budgets that work. So during the last budget cycle, the school committee, after we'd heard appropriation that was to the schools that we were considering, the schools looked at this and they came back, and Superintendent Myers thought that they were going to have to lay off teachers and support people and cut programs. And the way the council responded to that was, prior to passing the budget, we considered the numbers that might be necessary to avoid that. And what we did is Superintendent Myers participated in our town council meeting, which was great. So I actually asked her, I said, I asked her, if we find this amount of money for you, will you keep that staff and keep those, professionals who need to be in front of students and keep those programs? Will you do it? Now, the reason I asked the question is that the budget process, which is not intuitive to most of us, is that the school committee submits a budget and they kind of justify it to us and explain it, and then the town council appropriates money based upon its review of the needs. Even if we gave the school exactly what they wanted, and you may recall our first term, we gave a supplemental appropriation mid-year, and then we gave the schools every single dime they asked for. It was a fully funded year, and we felt good doing that because they needed the money due to the starvation that happened under the prior council. And so we did that. In this budget, okay, we appropriate money, but they're not required to spend it on anything in the budget. They have complete discretion once we give them the money to do whatever they want with it. That really means that the budget presented is more of an aspirational document or a principles signal, not an actual commitment to do any individual one of these things. So what the council did is I asked Superintendent Myers, if we gave you this money, will you retain that staff? And of course, she can't commit to the school committee, but she, I thought, very helpfully said that her highest priority would be to keep those professionals in front of the students. What we did is we allocated them 0.95%, and they retained those people. So that's what we did do. Going forward, what we can do is going to depend entirely on what resources are available. Sure. What am I most proud of? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like beyond question, it's not one specific thing because, it's that we were, we restored confidence in our government. We restored East Greenwich's brand. Parents feel like their children are going to schools supported by the town council. The property values are flying largely because of that. People want to live here. We've, stopped. It was embarrassing to go around the state and have people say, "What's going on in East Greenwich?" That was embarrassing to us. And it wasn't good for our kids to have the schools at war with the town council and to have 50 pieces of litigation and acrimony everywhere that mirrored the federal government. We didn't want that. And from my perspective, I know people say that the last election, the Democrats won. Look, I don't see it that way. It's not like the people who voted for me were voting for a Democrat. They were voting for me. We know each other. This is a small community, and Mike, as people